Everyone's brain works differently. So, what would happen if employers gave everyone the conditions that they needed to thrive? How much change would it take? And what would be the impact on business performance? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 725 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Recruiting Future helps talent acquisition teams drive measurable impact by developing strategic capability in foresight, influence, talent, and technology. If you're interested in finding out how your TA function measures up in these four critical areas, I've created the free Fit for the Future assessment. It'll give you personalized insights to help you build strategic clarity and drive greater impact immediately. Just head over to mattalder.me/podcast to complete the assessment. It only takes a few minutes. This episode is about talent. Up to 20% of the global workforce is likely to be neurodivergent and mostly undiagnosed. Understanding how to unlock the full potential of people with non-typical brains should be important to all employers. The difference between the right and the wrong job fit for someone with ADHD or other neurodivergent conditions can be the difference between struggling daily and becoming a top performer. So, what if the key to creating exceptional teams lies not in trying to fit everyone into the same mould, but in asking the right questions to understand what each person needs to thrive? My guest this week is Shel Mendelsohn, an ADHD career coach with 35 years of experience helping neurodivergent individuals find their ideal work fit. In our conversation, Shel shares her proven process for identifying the must-haves that enable neurodivergent employees to perform at their highest levels, and explains why understanding individual needs benefits both employees and employers. Hi, Shel, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Matt. Great to be here.
A pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
I am an ADHD/ND for neurodivergent career coach, and I help ND individuals of all ages decide on the best career fit or job fit for them based on their specific needs and who they are. So I'm mostly I've been a 35-year veteran of career coaching, and I started working with ND clients about 15 years ago after my own diagnosis.
I suppose for people listening who have kind of no experience of neurodiversity themselves, what challenges do you see in the workforce for neurodivergent individuals? I suppose particularly people with ADHD, and how is sort of traditional work or traditional recruiting processes failing them?
I don't know that it's the recruiting so much as people not really knowing what they want and need in their work, which is what I help them identify. So from the employer perspective, it's really maybe just asking the right questions and providing them with a way to identify what they need in their work. And I, focus on if you're not fulfilled and you're not energized by your work, as an ND person, our brain wiring really will not allow us to perform at the highest level. Let's put it that way.
How would someone work out what it was that they needed to perform at the highest level? How does it kind of work from that career coaching side? What is it that people need to think about if they're in this kind of situation?
Well, over 35 years, I developed a process which originated with Richard Bull's training that I received from him many, many years ago in What Color is Your Parachute? So I used that process for many years until I strayed from my own work, started a company, and although the company was successful, I was not happy in it. Never understood as an undiagnosed person why that was. And when I finally realized that I was different, that there were things that I was not meshing with my coworkers on, and realized that I needed to get a diagnosis, and I did, and that really changed everything. And I went back to doing the work that I was supposed to be doing originally, which was the work I'm doing now, and I was able to build on that over the last 15 years. And recognizing that ND people really have different needs and are very specific to each individual. But again, the bottom line is the fit needs to be there for there to be the most productivity, the most enjoyment and of their work, for them to feel fulfilled, which will impact their performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And if, someone's looking for a job, because very often the way that a job or a company is talked about in an interview process is very different to the reality that people find when they get there. How do you sort of coach people to deal with that? What kind of questions do they need to ask during the interview process? How do you know if a role is going to kind of meet those sort of very specific requirements that you might have?
Well, personally, in my business, I do it through an 8-week course called the Your Next Career Move Masterclass. And we go through the whole, we identify each of the areas that make up one's quote unquote ideal work and break it down, such as asking questions like, what are the skills that you enjoy using the most? And I call them the must-haves in their work. And then they prioritize those. So the skills, the people they enjoy working with and for, the working conditions, which is a very big piece of it, which we break down very specifically, the fields, industries, areas that they are attracted to identify one or two that they will eventually begin to consider when they're making either creating as an entrepreneur an industry they want to work within or working for a company. So that then also what their salary and rewards need to be, what their, even the geographical area is important because the area that they live in needs to support who they are, or at least they need to be aware of their surroundings. And life purpose, we actually go to that level, which helps individuals identify what their overall purpose is and how that aligns with the work they do. So believe it or not, that impacts how they perform on the job.
Now, obviously, I know that everyone is different, but what are the kind of common barriers that neurodiverse people come up against at work? Are there any patterns there? Are there any sort of specific things that come up time and time again?
I think when a person doesn't understand totally what the right fit is, usually the barriers will happen pretty much when they're in the wrong fit, because when they understand that, the chances of them actually taking a position that is not a good fit for them is less, much, much less. And then they're able to ask questions before that even happens. So the real work starts before the job even begins. But once they're on the job, it's really understanding if there's any way that they can ask the employer to maybe recreate or help them with the conditions that could be impeding their work, such as even their space they're working within. It could be the physical conditions of their work. It could be the people that they're working around, maybe some of the tasks that they're doing that they're spending too much time on that don't really fit for them, that they could maybe trade with somebody else and spend more time working on tasks that would be a better fit for them. And a lot of it really comes with them understanding these things first, and then perhaps and or the employer asking them questions related to those areas.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because as I was asking that question, I was sort of reflecting on my own experience as someone with ADHD. And the difference between two jobs, if it's the right job for you, if it's the wrong job for you, is just remarkable. It's almost like the things that would have stood in your way in the previous job almost don't exist in the next job. It's a very personal thing, isn't it?
It's very personal. I'm very glad you said that. It is remarkable because when a person is in the right fit, there's almost no barriers. There's no problem. It doesn't, all of the issues that you see when a person's in the wrong fit almost disappear because then they're focused, they're energized, they're doing the work that they need to be doing. They're showing appreciation. They're energized. They're, again, very focused and very productive. So there's such a big difference. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and I think it comes out a lot when very kind of successful people or high-performing people announce to the world they've got ADHD, and it's just kind of like, well, how can you have achieved all this kind of stuff? But I think that really is the sort of the crux of it. There are obviously lots of people who are in jobs that don't have that kind of flow through for whatever reason, or it's not something that they can always maintain. One of the things that I see talked about quite a lot is the adjustments and accommodations that should be made for ND people. And I know that a lot of times employers can see these as a barrier or really onerous to do. I remember there was a discussion in the industry a few weeks ago about whether interview processes should be tailored to the needs of neurodiverse people, and there was a real sense that they shouldn't be because that was just too much work and too difficult, and what did these people expect, which is incredibly disappointing to read, but not surprising. Can we bust some myths around this? Because very often the adjustments and accommodations that people need to really perform aren't necessarily very big things, are they?
No, not always. If it's the right actual fit, but it's just some of the conditions that can be fixed in some way. Generally, again, this is an individual thing that each person needs to create what I consider, or I call a self-accommodation plan. And that's where you break down all of the areas such as the physical, some of the cultural aspects, some of the things that, and when I say simple, if it's the wrong fit, there could be a lot involved, and maybe they shouldn't even be there. They shouldn't be in that job, period. But things that could be simple if they're in the right job could be some of where they're sitting, for example, the noise level, so when we talk about the physical things, we talk about things that become distractions potentially. So maybe being allowed to wear headsets, you've heard that before, or just the chair, even the chair they're sitting on, or the space they're working within, like the cubicle thing may not work for everyone if they feel that there's a lot of distractions around that space. Some people need more light. Some people are impacted by just really subtle things, like even the carpeting or the walls. I know that sounds crazy. You can't make those kind of changes, but before the person actually decides on accepting a position, they really kind of need to know what the must-haves are for them. That's what I call that. And so when we go into that self-accommodation process, they're breaking it all down, and then they're prioritizing the things that are the most important to them. So the top 5 things that they list really is the key.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think sometimes just showing someone where they're going to work and who they're going to work with and how everything fits together is just incredibly important, because you're right. It's not necessarily that employers can change those things, but people can make a decision as to whether they think they're going to be able to work in that environment or deal with that. And I think that's important. And again, everyone's different. The headphone thing is really interesting because I'll put noise cancelling headphones on all the time and then forget to put the music on. But actually, I've realized over time that just the fact of having them on helps me concentrate. So it's a kind of a really interesting thing, just sitting there with them on.
Like all of a sudden you realize you've just accomplished 100 things on your list, right?
Yeah, and I forgot to, and I was so busy doing it, I forgot to turn the music on.
And the other thing about us in terms of our productivity is when we're in the right fit, we are heads above neurotypical people in terms of productivity. And we are the movers and shakers. So again, we are the entrepreneurs, we invent things, we create products and services. We are the ones that when we're doing what we're really meant to be doing, it's no holds barred.
Coming back to this thing about fit is again really important, because sometimes a lot of the things I see out there about ADHD in particular in the workplace is that people with ADHD have these superhuman powers, and if you give them the right set of noise cancelling headphones, then they're going to be away with this hyper focus and all this sort of, it's going to be amazing. And I think sometimes, and I can see why people talk about that, because they want to really make people understand the benefits of having someone who's neurodivergent on your team. But I think sometimes it can underplay the problems that people have as well. It's like, not, you can't necessarily hyper-focus at will, or certainly not hyper-focus at will on the right thing.
Right. It's the right thing. It's really understanding what that is. And the person, the ND person really does need to understand that and have the ability to articulate that. And very often that is the issue, is they really don't know. They don't understand. They know there's something not working for them, but it's hard to put your finger on it. And it's not always a safe place to say something, to speak up, because you don't want to be singled out. You don't want your coworkers to give you the side eye. You don't want anyone to accuse you of being given priority over doing specific tasks. But if you don't understand what those accommodations need to be for yourself, there's no way that you can really express to anyone the importance of it. And being able, again, to identify what the must-haves are. And I always say the must-haves are the top 5 to 10 that you prioritize in the process that I do. And that's why I do this process. It gives people the words, it gives them the security in knowing. It actually elevates their self-confidence.
I think there's a really important point there as well, because people with ADHD, in terms of asking for things or feeling awkward or feeling that they are causing problems, the kind of the inbuilt the inbuilt thing about rejection in ADHD is absolutely massive. So people will actually avoid that because they don't want to feel like they're being rejected by someone, or someone is having a go at them, because it's a kind of a massive issue. So I think that probably even compounds the problem, because people won't necessarily speak up and say what they want or they need if they feel that there is a chance that someone might say no, or at least be put out by them asking.
It's scary. It is a scary thing to do, to reach out and say, this is what I need. But there's always another side of it. When you understand what you need, you can always say, under these conditions, you're going to get the best employee ever. You're going to find somebody who's like not only dedicated, but highly productive. And those are things you can actually say when you understand what they are first. But if you don't understand that, how are you going to say it? How are you going to know? It's still that rejection thing, that sensitivity that many of us have. I have it. I understand what that's like.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I suppose from an employer perspective, I think I always talk a lot about the facets of the interview process, like looking for people to make great eye contact or have a good handshake, or all those kind of things are kind of really sort of stacked against neurodivergent people. However, I think there's a bit in there about actually, if an employer is interviewing someone for a role, is asking those right questions about actually, what is it that we need to do to make you the best employee that we've ever had? And it's just that kind of questioning, rather than kind of relying on a very kind of stereotyped view of what that person's like, or standard things that they might do for someone who's neurodiverse in an interview. Well, actually, just asking the right questions is probably 10 times more powerful than some of the kind of standard things that employers might think they have to do in that kind of circumstance.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, Matt. That's absolutely right. I think if employers were more likely to ask the right questions and make it safe for the person to answer without feeling like they have to pretend or mask or answer in a way that's going to get them the work, because it's really important to know that if this isn't a good fit, it is better that that person walk away. It really is, because it saves the employer, it saves the potential employee potentially months or even years of real problems and challenges. And so knowing that, it's that awareness that's so important, of knowing and articulating what is important to you, and feeling confident that if you are safe enough to say it, and that if it's the wrong fit, it's okay to walk away, that makes all the difference in the world. I just literally had that happen with somebody who was in my masterclass the last week, who said he walked away from a job he normally would have taken because he was able to ask the questions and feel confident that it was okay for him to do that. He wasn't a people pleaser, or what I call a job beggar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're put in that job beggar position, you're likely to say things that aren't necessarily true and get yourself in trouble later on.
Yeah. No, I can see how that happens as well. It's that kind of, again, that sort of people pleasing. I don't want to feel rejected. I don't want to, make someone not like me, all those kind of things. And I think that, I suppose what's a real shame for me is where someone has got the right fit in the job, but actually there's just some really small things that actually, if the employer really thought about it, aren't that important, that could be changed, that would make that, make them fly. So I'm just thinking off the top of my head, things like, if it's an office job, being able to come to the office a little bit later to avoid the rush on the trains, or working, be able to do Zoom calls with the camera off. People not coming up to me going, "Can I have a quick word?" and not telling me what it's about. Just all those kind of tiny little things that are actually really kind of micro adjustments. But I don't think people realize what a massive difference they can make, and sometimes they seem ridiculous as well. It's like, how could someone's brain really think like that? That if I just change this, the world has completely changed for them. But it is like that.
It's the small changes, but also, again, going back to the self-accommodation detail of understanding those little minor things that are really laid out when we go through that process. It's not a simple process. They have to really think about all of those conditions. I call them the physical and non-physical conditions, and things like culture, and how the culture, even diversity, is important to some people. All those things are really needed so that you feel confident enough to ask the question, and the employer can say, what is it that you're looking for in a company? And answer honestly both ways.
Yeah, 100%. I just think that's the thing. It's just kind of such a shame sometimes that these things really kind of get in the way.
They don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. And if they do have to, then it is because it's not the right fit. I think that's the sort of the key part of it. One of the things that lots of people, particularly with ADHD, end up doing is, being entrepreneurs, being self-employed. It just kind of seems to be a direction that lots of people go in. Specifically from an employer's perspective, are there things that they could think about in someone's career that would sort of, I don't know, mimic those conditions, or give them that kind of stimulus to really persuade a great performer to stay and not necessarily go and set up their own thing?
Well, number one, most people, when we do a little exercise on working conditions where the first thing they do is list all the things that have not worked for them, things that they dislike in the working conditions they've had before. And one of them is micromanaging. And I think if you ask, you're neurodivergent, right? Yeah, so one of the questions you ask is, how are you at taking instruction? Because many of us don't like to be told what to do when we already know what we're supposed to do. And if we enjoy what we're supposed to do, the last thing we need is somebody kind of micromanaging us or giving us artificial deadlines or not giving any structure at all to an assignment.
And I think also there's a bit about micromanagement where someone can ask you a really simple question like, what are you doing today? How are you getting on with that? If it's kind of like, it can feel like an attack. They've come to get me. They've done something wrong. Just because it's just like, why have you asked me that when I'm obviously getting on with it? It's like, you must have an agenda and you must hate me.
Exactly. You know what it's like. Yeah, I mean, I was always once I got my master's and I started working in my field and career, I worked for 2 companies and the only way I could really work for them was that I was kind of independent within the company. And it put more on me to actually go out and get the work that I was supposed to get and meet with potential. I work for insurance companies who were referring workers' compensation cases to me, but that really worked because I could then go out and meet them and recruit my own work. But I worked under the auspices of another company. And they provided the office, they provided the support, they provided so much to me, but I was very independent within that process. And and so I just want to say that I left to do my own thing. And I said, well, if I can do this on my own, right, at some point. It was after that the second employer decided to become more of a corporate entity and started emphasizing how I was doing things and started kind of looking over my shoulder more and making suggestions for how to do things that I had no interest in whatsoever. Like I wasn't interested in being their manager and managing people. I didn't like managing people. I liked working on my own. So it was at that point that I said no, and I left.
Yeah, 100%. I think also I've discovered that I tend to break assessment tests because my results will come back and they'll say it doesn't like micromanagement and doesn't like all that kind of stuff, needs the sort of freedom to go and do his own thing. The next question will be like, needs lots of structure.
Right.
It's such an interesting contradiction. And it just struck me there when you were talking that you were kind of, you're allowed to go and do your own thing and do that, but you knew you had that structure that you could kind of fall back on. And again, there's a lot of contradictions with this that can be quite difficult for people to understand.
We need the structure in the sense that it's kind of a wide berth versus we need to know where we can't go beyond, but not the micromanaging kind of structure where somebody's looking over your shoulder. It's like, okay, these are things this is the limit, and maybe this is the deadline. Deadlines, I love deadlines, by the way, because I usually beat the deadline. That's me. I don't wait till the last minute when I have a deadline. If I don't have a deadline, I'm just going to linger on and sort of get it done on my time.
Yeah, again, that's an interesting paradox because in some ways I'm terrible at deadlines. I'm just forever missing them. However, if I didn't have deadlines, then nothing would get done. So
Exactly. Nothing would get done. I tend to do things quicker. So if you give me a deadline, I'll get it done like a week early because I don't want to even come up close to that deadline and then have to, like I've done in the past, try and get everything done all at once. That doesn't work for me anymore. For some people it does, but so I'm kind of the other way with that. Not everybody's like me with the ADHD. Not everyone.
Yeah, I think almost a kind of a final observation that I'd make is that people with ADHD are very different to each other. They have some very common things that they kind of recognize in each other, but they're very different. And I think from a broader employment perspective, where obviously when we talk about neurodiverse people, they do have brains that are wired differently. So they are very different. However, everyone's brain is slightly different. So across the whole organization, there are ways that people want to work. There are ways that people want to think. So it's just a kind of a spectrum of difference. And I think that if employers kind of sort of truly embrace inclusion around this, then they will have an incredible workforce because they're giving people the best opportunity to be the best that they can be.
Oh, I think if they don't do that, they're really missing out on really improving their own company and their own business, basically. I think it's just good business to really pay attention and sort of understand that people need certain conditions and they need to be able to ask questions and feel confident enough to articulate what's going on with them so that the employer can make the adjustment or help make the adjustment. And that will up-level that company. I mean, if you have a bunch of people who are working for you that are fully embracing what they're doing, guess what? That's the best possible scenario for that business.
Yeah, and I think also we're talking about a situation that up to 20% of the world's population has, and most people are undiagnosed, and a lot of people don't even realize that that this is what's going on. So I think that it affects a far bigger percentage of the workforce that an employer might have than they would ever realize. And I think that's another important part of it, basically.
That's really true. I was actually diagnosed very late in life. And I think the reason it took so long for me was that I was always doing what I enjoyed doing. And because I was in the right career, I was kind of a rock star once I got my degree and was moving on. I did really well in it, and employers wanted me. It was the opposite. They tried to accommodate me even though I was undiagnosed. It was when I started this other company and ended up doing the day-to-day that I really didn't like anymore. I love putting it together, the company, as many of us creative types do. We like to create new opportunities and things like that, and that's what I was doing. But the day-to-day really wore me down and bored me, and I was miserable. And that's when I got the diagnosis, because I realized, why am I disliking this so much? Well, it was because I wasn't doing the work I enjoyed doing and the work I was meant to do. Yeah,
100%. Finally, just tell us where people can find you and find your work.
There's two ways: career coaching with Shell, SHELL.com, or passion to career.com. Either one of those work. I also wrote the book called Unlock Your Career Path, a course for neurodivergent adults and teens, which literally takes everything that we've been talking about. It will walk you through that whole process. So it will help. I'm encouraging employers to direct their employees to the book so they can at least come back with either this is not a good fit for me, or these are the things that I need to accommodate. All those questions can be answered by going through this book.
Shell, thank you very much for talking to me.
It was a pleasure.
My thanks to Shell. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can benchmark your talent acquisition capability quickly and easily by completing the free Fit for the Future assessment. Just head over to mattalder.me/podcast. It only takes a few minutes and you'll receive valuable insights straight away. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also search through all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.